The Silent Wealth Killers, 7 Habits Keeping You Poor Without You Knowing. I used to think I was smart with money. I had a budget spreadsheet, I compared prices at the grocery store, I even brought lunch from home most days. But every month, when I checked my bank account, the number stayed the same. Sometimes it went down. I was working harder, earning more each year, but wealth? That remained a distant dream, something other people seemed to achieve effortlessly while I treaded water. The worst part wasn't the lack of progress. It was the gnawing feeling that I was doing something fundamentally wrong, but I couldn't see it. I was blind to my own financial sabotage. And here's what terrified me when I finally understood. The habits destroying my wealth weren't the obvious ones. They weren't expensive cars or lavish vacations. They were invisible, socially acceptable, even praised by the people around me. These weren't just my habits, they're embedded in our culture, passed down through generations, marketed to us as virtues, and silently practiced by millions of intelligent people who will never understand why prosperity eludes them. What I'm about to share changed everything for me, but it also made me angry. Angry at how long I'd been deceived. Angry at the systems designed to keep me consuming instead of building. And angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. The revelation came on a Tuesday afternoon in March, sitting across from a financial advisor I'd finally worked up the courage to meet. I was 32 years old, made a decent salary, and had exactly $4,700 in savings. The advisor, a man named Richard, with silver hair and patient eyes, asked me a simple question that shattered my entire worldview. "Tell me," he said, leaning back in his chair, "what do you think wealth actually is?" I gave him the answer I thought was obvious: money in the bank, assets, property, financial freedom. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who'd heard the same wrong answer 1,000 times before. "Wealth," he told me, "is not what you have. It's what you keep, multiply, and pass on. And almost everything you've been taught about money is designed to prevent you from doing those 3 things." I left his office that day with a reading list and a challenge. Identify the invisible habits that were keeping me poor. Not the obvious ones, but the subtle patterns I'd never questioned. It took me 6 months of brutal self-examination to find them. And when I did, I realized I wasn't alone. These habits weren't just mine. They were everywhere. Before I reveal these 7 wealth killers, I need you to do something. If you're watching this and something I say resonates, even if it makes you uncomfortable, hit that like button. And if you want more content that exposes the hidden systems keeping intelligent people trapped in financial mediocrity, subscribe to this channel. I promise you, what you're about to learn isn't taught in schools, isn't discussed at dinner tables, and is actively discouraged by the corporations that profit from your ignorance. This isn't another generic finance video telling you to skip the daily coffee or cancel your streaming subscriptions. Those tips might save you a few $100s a year. What I'm sharing will restructure how you think about money entirely. It will make you question decisions you've been making for decades. It might even make you angry at yourself, at your parents, at society. Good. Anger is the first step toward change. Comfort is the enemy of wealth. So let's get uncomfortable together. Let's talk about the first habit that's been silently destroying your financial future since the moment you earned your first paycheck. The first wealth killer is something I call achievement spending. And it's probably the most socially acceptable form of financial self-sabotage there is. Here's how it works. You work hard for a promotion. You study for years to earn a degree. You land a new job with a salary increase. And what's the first thing you do? You celebrate by spending money. You upgrade your apartment. You buy a nicer car because you deserve it. You take a vacation, buy new clothes, invest in a better phone. Society tells you this is normal. Your friends congratulate you on your success. Your family is proud. But here's the truth nobody tells you. Every time you increase your income and immediately increase your spending to match it, you reset your wealth-building timeline to 0. The people who become truly wealthy don't spend their raises. They invest them. They live like they earned the promotion 2 years before they actually did. The psychological trap of achievement spending is that it feels like you're rewarding yourself for hard work, when in reality, you're punishing your future self. I fell into this trap spectacularly when I got my first big raise at age 27. My salary jumped by $18,000 annually, Within 6 months, I'd moved to a more expensive apartment, bought a new car with a monthly payment, and upgraded my entire lifestyle. Guess how much more money I had saved at the end of that year compared to the previous one? Negative $2,000. I actually had less savings after earning $18,000 more. The math didn't make sense until I tracked every dollar. The rent increase was $600 monthly. The car payment was $450. The nicer neighborhood meant more expensive groceries, restaurants, gym membership. I was socializing with people who earned more, so I was spending more on clothes, entertainment, trips. I had fallen victim to what economists call lifestyle inflation, but I prefer a more honest term, the wealth prevention mechanism. Every time you expand your lifestyle to match your income, you're not getting richer, you're just getting more expensive to maintain. And here's the truly insidious part. Once you upgrade your lifestyle, downgrading feels like failure. It feels like moving backward. So you become trapped in a prison of your own making, where you need every dollar you earn just to sustain the life you've built. There's no room for investment, no room for risk, no room for the entrepreneurial moves that actually build wealth. You become a high-earning wage slave, and you don't even realize the chains you've forged yourself. The second wealth killer is what I call comfort addiction. And it's even more subtle than the first. This one took me years to recognize because it masquerades as self-care and mental health. Modern society has taught us that discomfort is bad, that we should optimize our lives for maximum convenience, that struggling is a sign something's wrong, not a sign we're growing. So we spend money to eliminate discomfort. We pay for food delivery instead of cooking because cooking is effort. We hire people to do tasks we could learn ourselves because learning takes time. We buy products that promise to make our lives easier, smoother, more efficient. And every single one of these small comfort purchases seems reasonable in isolation. But here's what they actually do. They train you to solve problems with money instead of with skills, time, or creativity. They turn you into someone who needs to constantly spend to maintain baseline functionality. I had a moment of clarity about this when I calculated how much I was spending on convenience services in a single month. Food delivery, laundry service, cleaning service, grocery delivery, car washes, lawn care. I was paying other people nearly $800 monthly to do things I was perfectly capable of doing myself. My justification was always time. My time is valuable, I'd tell myself. I should focus on high-leverage activities, not mowing the lawn. But I wasn't using that purchased time for high-leverage activities. I was using it to scroll social media, watch Netflix, and recover from work. I was buying comfort, not productivity. And comfort is expensive. The wealthy understand something most people don't. Discomfort builds capacity. When you're willing to be uncomfortable, to delay gratification, to invest your own time and effort instead of outsourcing everything, you develop skills and resilience that become assets in themselves. You also keep more money to invest in actual wealth-building activities. But there's something even more dangerous about comfort addiction. It creates a psychological dependency where you believe you need these comforts to function. You can't imagine life without them. So as your income grows, instead of building wealth, you just buy more comfort. A nicer house so you don't have to hear neighbors. A better car so your commute is pleasant. Premium everything so you never experience the friction of being a regular person. And before you know it, you're earning 6 figures and still living paycheck to paycheck because you've built a lifestyle that requires 6 figures just to maintain. The third wealth killer is the one that hit closest to home for me. And it's probably the most controversial thing I'll say in this video. It's what I call credential investment. And it's the belief that spending money on education, certifications, courses, and professional development is always a good investment. Let me be clear. I'm not anti-education. Knowledge is valuable. But there's a massive difference between education that builds wealth and education that builds credentials. And most people spend tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on the latter while convincing themselves it's the former. I have a master's degree that cost me $43,000. It took me 2 years to complete while working full-time. It was exhausting, stressful, and required sacrificing most of my personal life. And when I finally graduated and put those new letters after my name on my resume, Do you know how much it increased my salary? $3,000 annually. 3,000. At that rate, it would take me more than 14 years just to break even on the degree, and that's not accounting for the opportunity cost of what I could have done with that time and money instead. But here's what really opened my eyes. During those same 2 years, a friend of mine who dropped out of college had taught himself web development through free online resources. He started freelancing, built a small agency, and by the time I graduated with my fancy degree, he was earning more than twice what I made. He had 0 credentials, but he had skills that generated income immediately. The psychology of credential investment is seductive because it feels responsible. Parents approve. Society respects it. It fits the narrative we've been told since childhood. Get educated, get a good job, be successful. But wealth isn't built through credentials. It's built through skills that generate asymmetric returns. The ability to sell, to build systems, to identify opportunities, to take calculated risks. None of these skills are taught in most formal education programs, and yet they're the exact skills that separate the wealthy from the comfortable. I'm not saying don't get educated. I'm saying question whether the education you're pursuing is actually an investment or just an expensive signal to potential employers that you can follow instructions and accumulate debt. Because if it's the latter, you're not investing in wealth, you're investing in poverty with a diploma. The fourth wealth killer is something I call relationship spending. And it's probably the hardest one to address because it involves the people we love most. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Your social circle has a massive impact on your financial trajectory, and most people are surrounded by people who actively prevent them from building wealth. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but through social pressure, expectations, and normalized spending patterns that make saving and investing feel antisocial. Think about your friend group. When someone suggests getting together, what do they propose? Dinner at a restaurant, drinks at a bar, a concert, a trip, a shopping day, activities that cost money. And if you suggest something free like a hike or a potluck dinner at someone's house, you're seen as cheap, as no fun, as the person who doesn't want to invest in the friendship. I experienced this firsthand when I started seriously trying to build wealth. I began declining expensive social invitations and suggesting cheaper alternatives. The response from my friends was immediate and uncomfortable. Some thought I was going through financial hardship and offered to pay for me, which was humiliating. Others got quietly distant, like I'd betrayed some unspoken social contract. The truth was, I wasn't broke. I was choosing to allocate my money differently, but in a culture where spending equals caring, where generosity is measured in dollars, and where experiences are commodified into Instagram moments that cost money, choosing not to spend felt like choosing not to participate in friendship itself. Here's what I learned the hard way. You cannot build wealth while maintaining relationships with people who spend everything they earn. Not because they're bad people, but because the social pressure to conform to group spending norms is overwhelming. Every wedding you attend costs money. Every birthday celebration costs money. Every holiday gathering involves gifts and travel. Every weekend hangout involves restaurants and entertainment. And if you're the only person trying to save and invest, while everyone around you is spending freely, you'll either break and spend to fit in, or you'll drift away and lose the relationships. The wealthy solve this problem in a way most people never consider. They build new relationships with people who share their financial values. They don't abandon their old friends out of snobbery. They simply gravitate toward people who talk about investments instead of purchases, who celebrate financial discipline instead of mocking it, and who understand that real wealth is built in private, not displayed in public. I'm not telling you to dump all your friends. I'm telling you to be brutally honest about whether your social circle is helping you build the life you want or keeping you trapped in the life you have. Because loyalty to people who prevent your growth isn't loyalty. It's just expensive self-sabotage with a noble-sounding excuse. The fifth wealth killer is one that almost nobody talks about, and when I first heard about it, I was skeptical. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It's what I call identity spending, and it's the money you spend to maintain the person you believe you are, even when that identity is costing you your future. Let me explain what I mean. Somewhere in your life, You decided who you are. Maybe you're the generous one who always picks up the check. Maybe you're the professional who needs to look polished and put together at all times. Maybe you're the fun one who's always down for an adventure. Maybe you're the good parent who gives your kids every opportunity. These identities feel like core parts of who you are. They feel non-negotiable. And because they feel so essential to your sense of self, you'll spend almost any amount of money to maintain them, even when it's destroying your financial future. I realized I was doing this when I noticed I was spending $300 monthly on clothes I wore maybe twice. Why? Because I'd internalized an identity as someone who dresses well. It wasn't even about impressing others at that point. It was about maintaining my own self-image. I'd see something stylish, and my brain would tell me, that's who you are, that's what you wear. If you don't buy that, you're not being yourself. The same pattern showed up everywhere once I started looking. I was someone who tries new restaurants, so I spent recklessly on dining out. I was someone who stays current with technology, so I upgraded devices constantly. I was someone who supports local businesses, so I overpaid for things I could get cheaper elsewhere. Each individual choice seemed small, but collectively, I was spending thousands of dollars annually to maintain these identity stories I'd told myself. And here's the truly insane part. I wasn't even happy doing it. The clothes didn't make me feel more stylish. The restaurants weren't making my life better. The technology upgrades were marginal improvements at best, but I kept spending because not spending would mean admitting I wasn't the person I thought I was. The wealthy understand something crucial. Identity is fluid, and the identities that serve you in your 20s will bankrupt you in your 30s if you're not willing to evolve. They're comfortable saying, I used to be someone who did that, but now I'm someone who's building wealth. They don't see it as a betrayal of self, they see it as growth. But most people would rather stay poor than question their identity. They'd rather maintain the story they tell themselves about who they are than actually become someone with financial freedom. And the market knows this. Every product, every service, every brand is selling you an identity. They're not selling you coffee. They're selling you the identity of someone who appreciates quality. They're not selling you a car. They're selling you the identity of someone successful. They're not selling you a vacation. They're selling you the identity of someone who values experiences. And you buy, not because you need the product, but because you need to believe you're the person who buys that product. Until you separate your sense of self from your spending patterns, you will never build wealth. Because identity spending has no upper limit. There's always another purchase that will reinforce who you think you are. The sixth wealth killer is something that took me the longest to understand. And it's what I call future self-betrayal. This one is subtle because it feels responsible, even virtuous. But it's actually one of the most destructive financial habits intelligent people have. Here's how it works. You make financial decisions based on who you hope to be in the future rather than who you actually are right now. You buy a gym membership for the person who's going to work out 5 days a week, even though current you exercises maybe twice a month. You pay for premium streaming services for the person who's going to watch all that quality content, even though current you watches the same 3 shows on repeat. You buy books for the person who's going to read voraciously, even though current you has 17 unread books on the shelf. You invest in expensive hobby equipment for the person who's going to pursue that passion seriously, even though current you hasn't touched it in months. Every one of these purchases feels like an investment in becoming better. You're not being frivolous, you're being aspirational. You're buying the life you want to live. Except you're not living it. You're just paying for the fantasy of living it. I realized I was doing this when I calculated how much I'd spent on future me over the previous year. Online courses I never completed, $800. Gym membership I barely used, $600. Musical instrument I was going to learn, $400. Camping gear for trips I never took, $500. Professional wardrobe for the confident business person I wanted to be, $1,200. In total, I'd spent more than $3,500 on a version of myself that didn't exist. And the worst part, each purchase actually made me less likely to become that person. Because once I'd spent the money, I felt like I'd already taken action. My brain registered the purchase as progress. I'd address the desire to be more active by buying the gym membership. I'd address the desire to be more cultured by buying the books. The spending satisfied the urge to change without requiring any actual change. It's a psychological trap called goal replacement, where the action that signals commitment to a goal replaces the actual work toward the goal. And it's incredibly expensive. The wealthy don't pay for aspirational identities. They invest in actual skill development, usually by doing rather than buying. If they want to get fit, they start doing push-ups in their living room, not buying a Peloton. If they want to learn something, they find free resources and actually do the work, not enrolling in a course that sits uncompleted. They understand that buying things doesn't create change. Action creates change. Purchases just create the illusion of progress while draining the resources you need to actually transform. Every dollar you spend on future you is a dollar current you is stealing from actual future you. The one who'll need that money invested and growing, not gathering dust in a closet as a monument to abandoned aspirations. And here's the question that changed everything for me. If you were genuinely going to become that person, wouldn't you prove it through action first and reward yourself with the purchase after, once you'd actually done the work? The fact that you're buying first and hoping the purchase will motivate you reveals the truth. You don't really believe you'll do it. You're just buying the temporary feeling of being someone who might. That feeling is expensive, and it's keeping you poor. Now we come to the seventh and final wealth killer, and this one is the most painful to acknowledge because it requires admitting something most people would rather die than confess. It's what I call competence avoidance, and it's the money you spend to avoid developing skills that would make you less dependent on spending money. Let me give you a concrete example. I used to pay someone to change my car's oil. It cost me $50 every few months. I told myself it was worth it because my time was valuable and I didn't know how to do it myself. But here's the truth. Learning to change oil takes about 30 minutes and costs virtually nothing in tools if you're willing to watch a YouTube video and try. I didn't avoid learning because I lacked time. I avoided learning because some part of me was afraid I'd do it wrong, afraid I'd look stupid, afraid I'd fail at something mechanical because I'd always thought of myself as not handy. So instead of confronting that fear and developing competence, I just kept paying. The same pattern existed everywhere in my life. I paid for tax preparation because I was afraid of understanding tax law. I paid for car repairs without getting multiple quotes because I didn't understand cars well enough to advocate for myself. I paid for website services because I was intimidated by technology. I paid for meal kit deliveries because I hadn't developed confidence in the kitchen. Each time I paid someone else to do something I could have learned to do myself, I told myself a story about efficiency and comparative advantage. But the real story was simpler and more embarrassing. I was paying money to avoid the discomfort of being a beginner at something. And over the course of a year, that comfort cost me thousands of dollars. But the money was actually the smallest cost. The real cost was the competence I never developed. See, every skill you avoid learning keeps you dependent. It keeps you in a position where you need to spend money to maintain basic functionality in your life. And that dependency is expensive in ways that compound over decades. When you don't understand how things work, whether it's your taxes, your car, your home, your technology, or your finances, you're at the mercy of experts. You can't evaluate whether you're being overcharged. You can't identify unnecessary services. You can't do simple maintenance that prevents expensive repairs. You're functionally helpless, and helplessness requires a constant outflow of cash. The wealthy aren't wealthy because they know everything. They're wealthy because they're aggressively willing to learn what they don't know, especially when learning that thing will save or make them money. They don't pay for oil changes. They either learn to do it themselves or they buy electric cars that don't need oil changes. They don't pay tax preparers. They learn tax strategy or they structure their income in ways that minimize taxes. They don't pay for financial advisors to manage standard investments. They learn enough to make informed decisions themselves. Every skill they develop is a permanent reduction in their cost of living and an increase in their autonomy. And here's what really matters. Skill development isn't just about saving money. It's about building confidence and agency. Every time you learn to do something yourself instead of paying someone else, you prove to yourself that you're capable, that you can figure things out, that you're not helpless. That confidence spills over into every area of life, including the confidence to start a business, make investments, negotiate salary, and take the calculated risks that actually build wealth. But most people never develop that confidence because they're too afraid of the discomfort of being bad at something. So they stay dependent, they stay helpless, and they stay poor, no matter how much they earn, because their cost of living scales with their incompetence. These 7 habits, achievement spending, comfort addiction, credential investment, relationship spending, identity spending, future self-betrayal, and competence avoidance, they're not random. They're interconnected. They reinforce each other. And they create a psychological cage that's incredibly difficult to escape because each habit feels reasonable, even responsible, in isolation. You're not being reckless. You're not buying sports cars or gambling. You're just living a normal, middle-class life making normal, socially acceptable financial decisions. And that's exactly the problem. Because those normal decisions are designed to keep you consuming, not building. They're designed to keep you dependent, not autonomous. They're designed to keep you in the system as a reliable spender rather than letting you opt out as an investor. When I first recognized these patterns in my own life, my immediate reaction was defensiveness. I wanted to explain why my situation was different, why my spending was justified, why I wasn't really doing these things, or if I was, why they were necessary. That defensiveness is natural. It's your brain protecting your self-image. But it's also the exact mechanism that keeps people trapped. Because as long as you're defending your current behavior, you can't change it. The shift happened for me when I stopped asking, why is this spending justified, and started asking, what am I really buying here? When I bought new clothes, what was I really buying? The approval of strangers, a sense of control, a brief dopamine hit? When I went to expensive restaurants, what was I really buying? Status, the feeling of being sophisticated, evidence that I was doing well in life. When I paid for convenience services, what was I really buying? Time I wouldn't use productively? The feeling of being important enough that my time was too valuable for basic tasks. Once I started asking these questions honestly, the answers were uncomfortable. I was spending money to manage emotions, to maintain illusions, to avoid confronting truths about myself I didn't want to face. I wasn't making rational financial decisions. I was using money as a coping mechanism, an identity prop, and a social lubricant, and it was costing me my future. Here's what nobody tells you about wealth. Building it doesn't require you to earn more money, at least not at first. It requires you to want different things, because as long as you want what the market is selling, you'll spend what you earn, no matter how much that is. The shift from poverty consciousness to wealth consciousness isn't about learning to save or invest. Though those are important, it's about fundamentally restructuring what you value. It's about finding meaning and satisfaction in things that don't cost money. In autonomy rather than convenience, in competence rather than credentials, in authentic relationships rather than social performance, in becoming rather than having. This transformation is possible. But it's not easy, because everything around you is designed to prevent it. Your entire culture, your economy, your social media feed, your peer group, even your family. They're all invested in you staying a consumer. They need you to keep spending. And they're very, very good at making spending feel like self-care, responsibility, love, and success. Breaking free requires you to question narratives you've believed your entire life. It requires you to accept social awkwardness. It requires you to be willing to look cheap, weird, or antisocial in the short term for the sake of a future most people will never believe in until they see it. But here's what makes it worth it. The moment you stop using money to manage your emotions and start using it to buy time and freedom, everything changes. Not immediately, not dramatically. But slowly, compound interest starts working in your favor instead of against you. Small amounts saved and invested begin to grow. Options begin to appear that weren't there before. The constant anxiety about money begins to ease. Not because you're earning significantly more, but because you're needing significantly less. And eventually, if you stay consistent, you reach a point where your investments generate enough passive income that work becomes optional. Not in decades. Not in some distant retirement, but in years. maybe 5, maybe 10. It depends on how aggressively you can cut your cost of living and how disciplined you can be about investing the difference. I'm not there yet myself. I'm 3 years into this journey, and I still make mistakes. I still occasionally fall back into old patterns. But my net worth has grown more in these 3 years than in the previous 15 combined. Not because I got a massive raise, not because I won the lottery, but because I stopped spending money to be the person I thought I should be and started investing it to become the person I actually want to be. Someone who has options. Someone who isn't trapped by monthly obligations. Someone who can take risks, because failure doesn't mean homelessness, and that, more than any amount in a bank account, is what wealth actually means. It means freedom from fear, freedom from dependency, freedom to say no to things that don't serve you and yes to things that do. But most people never get there because they never recognize the habits keeping them trapped. They keep working harder, earning more, and wondering why wealth stays just out of reach. They blame the economy. They blame their employer. They blame their circumstances. And sure, those things matter, but they matter far less than the daily choices that drain resources faster than they can be accumulated. So let me ask you directly. Which of these 7 habits recognized yourself in? Which one made you uncomfortable? Which one did you immediately want to defend or justify? Because that's the one that's costing you the most. That's the one you need to address first. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is too extreme. That life is meant to be enjoyed, that you can't just stop doing everything that costs money in some joyless pursuit of a bank account number. And you're right. Balance matters. But here's the thing. Most people aren't anywhere near the balance point. Most people are so far on the spending side that even moving toward balance feels like deprivation. And they're so addicted to the dopamine hits of purchasing and consuming that they can't imagine being happy without them. But I'm here to tell you that there's a different kind of satisfaction on the other side. The satisfaction of watching your net worth grow month after month. The satisfaction of having options when unexpected expenses arise. The satisfaction of not being afraid every time you check your bank account. The satisfaction of knowing you're building something that will compound over time, rather than just maintaining an expensive lifestyle. That satisfaction doesn't come from a single purchase. It doesn't fade after a few hours. It doesn't require you to keep spending to maintain it. It grows, and it's more fulfilling than any product or experience you can buy. But you'll never know that if you don't try. If you don't question the habits that are currently running your financial life. If you don't get uncomfortable enough to make changes. So here's your challenge. For the next 30 days before every purchase, ask yourself what you're really buying. Not the product, not the service, but the emotional need you're trying to meet. Am I buying status? Am I buying identity? Am I buying comfort? Am I buying the illusion of being someone I'm not yet? Am I avoiding developing a skill? Am I maintaining a social expectation? Just ask the question. You don't even have to change your behavior yet. Just notice, awareness is the first step, because you cannot change patterns you don't see, and most of these patterns are invisible until you shine light on them. Now, I want to tell you about something that happened 6 months into my own journey with this. I'd been tracking my spending religiously. I'd cut out most of the obvious waste. I was saving about 30% of my income, which felt impossible a year earlier. And then my car broke down. Major repair, $3,000. The old me would have panicked, would have put it on a credit card, would have felt like the universe was punishing me for trying to get ahead. But this time was different. I had an emergency fund, not a huge one, but enough. I paid cash for the repair, and while it hurt to see my savings drop, something remarkable happened. I realized I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my adult life, an unexpected expense didn't send me into a spiral of anxiety and despair. It was just a problem I could solve. That moment crystallized everything for me. This wasn't about money, it was about fear. I'd spent decades living in constant low-grade terror about finances. Every unexpected expense was a catastrophe. Every month was a tightrope walk, hoping nothing went wrong. I was making decent money, but I felt poor because I was poor. Not in income, but in security, in options, in breathing room. and I was poor because I'd been spending every dollar on things that didn't actually improve my life. I was buying temporary relief from the anxiety my spending was creating. It was a perfect, vicious cycle. And the only way out was to stop, to sit with the discomfort, to let the anxiety exist without spending money to numb it, to build the security that would eventually replace the fear. That's when I understood that these 7 habits aren't really about money at all. They're about emotional regulation. They're coping mechanisms that happen to be really expensive. And until you find other ways to cope, other ways to feel good about yourself, other ways to connect with people and find meaning, you'll never stop spending. Because you need to spend, not because you want the things you're buying, but because you need what you think those things will make you feel. The tragedy is that they never deliver. You buy the thing, you get a brief hit of satisfaction, and then you're back to baseline, needing the next thing. It's addiction, socially acceptable, culturally encouraged, economically necessary for the system to function addiction. But addiction nonetheless, and like any addiction, the first step to recovery is admitting you have a problem. Not a minor problem, not a I should probably budget better problem, but a genuine, life-limiting, future-stealing problem that will keep you trapped forever if you don't address it. I know that's hard to hear. I know it feels like I'm being dramatic or judgmental, but I'm not judging you. I'm telling you what I had to hear myself. What I resisted hearing for years because it was too painful to admit. I was addicted to spending. I was using consumption to manage my emotions, and it was destroying any chance I had at financial freedom. Saying that out loud, even just to myself, was terrifying. Because if it was true, it meant everything had to change. Not just my budget, but my identity, my relationships, my daily routines, my sources of pleasure and meaning. Everything. And change is hard. Change is uncomfortable. Change means loss before gain, means loneliness before new connections, means boredom before discovering new sources of joy. Most people aren't willing to go through that valley. They'd rather stay on the plateau they know, even if it's keeping them poor, than walk through the valley toward the mountain they can't yet see. I get it. I almost quit a dozen times in that first year. There were moments when I thought, what's the point? Maybe I should just live for today and worry about tomorrow when it comes. But I didn't quit. And the reason I didn't quit is the same reason I'm making this video. Because I started to see results. Not huge results. Not life-changing results. But enough results to make me believe it was possible. My net worth, which had been stagnant for years, started to climb. Slowly at first. $100 saved here. $200 there. But it added up. And more importantly, the anxiety started to ease. The constant financial stress that had been background noise in my life for so long started to quiet. Not because I was earning dramatically more, but because I wasn't spending everything I earned. Because I was building a buffer between me and disaster. That buffer, that financial breathing room, changed everything. It gave me the courage to negotiate a better salary because I wasn't desperate. It gave me the space to invest in learning skills that would actually increase my earning potential. It gave me the confidence to start a side project that might fail, because failure wasn't financially catastrophic anymore. The wealthy call this fuck you money, the amount you need to have options, to not be at the mercy of employers, clients, circumstances, or emergencies. For some people that's $10,000. For others it's $100,000. It depends on your life and your risk tolerance. But whatever the number is for you, you'll never reach it while practicing these 7 wealth-killing habits. Because these habits ensure that every dollar coming in flows right back out. They turn you into a conduit for money rather than a container. And you can't build wealth as a conduit. You can only build it as a container. This is the psychological shift that matters most. From seeing money as something to spend to seeing money as something to accumulate and deploy strategically. From seeing purchases as the goal to seeing purchases as the cost. From measuring success by lifestyle to measuring success by options. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens through repeated choices. Through saying no when you want to say yes. Through saying yes to discomfort when you want to choose ease. Through questioning your identity instead of defending it. Through confronting your incompetence instead of paying to avoid it. Every time you make the harder choice, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. And eventually, those votes add up to a new identity. Someone who doesn't need to spend to feel valuable. Someone who finds satisfaction in growth rather than acquisition. Someone who's building something instead of just maintaining something. Someone who's wealthy, not because they have a lot of money, but because they're no longer controlled by the need for more things. And that's the final truth I want to leave you with. Wealth isn't actually about money. It's about freedom from the psychological patterns that make you need money. It's about liberation from the status games, identity stories, and emotional coping mechanisms that require constant spending. It's about becoming someone who's satisfied with less because they're pursuing more meaningful goals than impressing strangers and maintaining appearances. When you get there, money stops being this fraught, emotional, anxiety-producing topic and becomes a simple tool. You use it when it serves your goals. You save it when spending doesn't serve your goals. There's no drama, no guilt, no shame. Just clarity about what you're building and discipline about not letting old habits sabotage it. I'm not going to pretend I've arrived at some enlightened place where money doesn't matter. I still feel the pull of old patterns. I still sometimes catch myself about to make a purchase to manage an emotion instead of addressing the emotion directly. But the difference is, now I see it. I catch myself. And more often than not, I make the choice that serves my future instead of my immediate comfort. That's all this really is. A series of small choices, repeated over time, compounding into a completely different life. Not because of any single dramatic change, but because of the cumulative effect of choosing differently hundreds of times. Choosing the harder thing, choosing growth over comfort, choosing the future over the present. That's how you break free from these 7 habits. Not through willpower or deprivation or hating yourself into change, but through repeatedly choosing the person you're becoming over the person you've been. And here's what makes it sustainable. As you make these choices, as you see the results, as you feel the shift from scarcity to abundance, from fear to confidence, the choices get easier. Not because the habits disappear, but because you develop new habits that you actually prefer. You prefer the satisfaction of a growing net worth over the brief hit of a new purchase. You prefer the confidence of developed skills over the convenience of paying someone else. You prefer the authenticity of relationships that don't revolve around spending over the social performance of expensive outings. You prefer being the person who's building something over being the person who's just maintaining an image. These new preferences aren't forced, they're genuine. They emerge naturally when you give yourself the space to discover what actually makes you happy versus what you've been told should make you happy. And what you discover is that the things that actually create lasting satisfaction, deep relationships, meaningful work, personal growth, creative expression, autonomy, health, they don't cost much money. They cost time, attention, effort, courage. But not money. Meanwhile, the things that cost a lot of money, status symbols, luxury goods, expensive experiences marketed as essential, they provide diminishing returns. They never satisfy for long. They always leave you wanting more. It's the perfect setup for a consumer economy. Keep people chasing satisfaction through purchases that can never deliver lasting satisfaction. Keep them working to earn money to spend on things that don't improve their lives, but that they believe they need to maintain their identity and social standing. Keep them trapped in the cycle. The way out is simple, but not easy. Stop buying what the market is selling. Stop believing the stories about what you need to be happy, successful, respected, loved. Start questioning everything. Start experimenting with less. Start discovering who you are when you're not defined by what you buy. This is uncomfortable work. It's identity-disrupting work. It's relationship-testing work. Most people won't do it because the temporary discomfort feels worse than the permanent trap. But if you do it, if you push through the discomfort and come out the other side, you'll look back and wonder how you ever lived any other way. You'll wonder how you tolerated the constant anxiety, how you accepted the lack of options, how you convinced yourself that spending money you didn't have on things you didn't need to impress people you didn't like was somehow the good life. You'll see it clearly for what it was, a trap. An expensive, socially sanctioned trap that keeps intelligent people poor while making them feel like they're living well. And once you see the trap, You can't unsee it. You'll notice it everywhere. In your friends' complaints about money while they're posting photos from expensive vacations. In your colleagues' new cars they clearly can't afford. In your family's gift-giving expectations that prioritize spending over thoughtfulness. In the entire economy built on convincing people that happiness is just one more purchase away. You'll feel like you've woken up in a world where everyone else is sleepwalking. And in a way, you have. Most people never wake up. They live their entire lives in the pattern. Working to spend, spending to feel better about working, never building anything, never escaping, just maintaining. Your job, if you choose to accept it, is to wake up, to see clearly, to make different choices, and then, if you're feeling generous, to help others wake up too. Not by judging them, not by being self-righteous about your own choices, but by living in a way that demonstrates another path is possible. By being proof that you can opt out of the consumption trap and not just survive, but thrive. By showing that there's more satisfaction in building wealth than in displaying wealth. That's what I'm trying to do with this video. Not lecture you, not shame you, but share what I've learned. Show you the patterns I was blind to for decades. Give you the language to identify the habits that are keeping you trapped. And maybe, hopefully, inspire you to question your own patterns and make different choices. Because the truth is, you don't need my advice. You don't need a course or a book or a financial advisor. You just need to be honest with yourself about what you're doing and why. You need to track your spending for a month and really look at where it's going. You need to ask yourself hard questions about what you're really buying. You need to sit with the discomfort of those answers instead of immediately defending your choices. And then you need to decide, is this the life you want to keep living? Is this person you want to keep being? Is this future you're okay with creating? If the answer is yes, great. I'm not here to tell you how to live. But if the answer is no, if there's even a small voice inside you saying, there has to be another way, then listen to that voice. Because it's right. There is another way. It's harder in the short term. It requires you to be different from the people around you. It requires you to question beliefs you've held your whole life. It requires you to value things that society does not value and reject things that society insists you need. But it's possible. I've done it. Thousands of others have done it. We're not special. We're not superhuman. We just got tired of being trapped. We got tired of working hard and having nothing to show for it. We got tired of the anxiety, and we decided to try something different. That's all it takes, a decision. And then 1,000 small choices that align with that decision. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to cut out all spending and live in a van. You just have to be intentional, aware, willing to choose differently when it matters. Start with one of the 7 habits. Pick the one that resonated most. The one that made you uncomfortable. The one you immediately wanted to defend. That's your starting point. Examine it, question it, experiment with doing it differently, and see what happens. Maybe you'll discover you don't miss it as much as you thought you would. Maybe you'll find satisfaction in the alternative. Maybe you'll feel a little more in control of your life and a little less controlled by your habits. And maybe, just maybe, that small change will be the crack in the dam. The opening that lets you see the other habits clearly. The first step toward a completely different relationship with money. That's what happened for me. One small change led to another. And another. And eventually I looked around and realized my entire life had transformed. Not because of any single dramatic decision, but because of the cumulative effect of choosing differently. Choosing awareness over habit. Choosing long-term over short-term. Choosing freedom over comfort. You can do this too, I believe that. Not because I think you're special, but because I know I'm not. I'm just a regular person who got tired of being broke despite having a good income. Who got tired of feeling trapped. Who got tired of wondering why wealth was easy for some people and impossible for me. And who finally realized it wasn't impossible. I was just doing the opposite of what wealthy people do. I was spending on everything they save on, saving on everything they spend on, valuing what they ignore, ignoring what they value. Once I flipped the script, everything changed. You can flip the script too, starting today, starting with awareness, and building from there. It won't be fast, it won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Because on the other side of these habits is freedom, real freedom. The kind that lets you sleep at night, the kind that gives you options, the kind that makes you wonder how you ever lived any other way. That's what I want for you. That's why I made this video. Not to judge or shame, but to illuminate. To help you see what I couldn't see for so long. To give you the map that I wish someone had given me years ago. So here's what I want you to do right now. Subscribe to this channel if you want more content like this. Content that challenges conventional wisdom about money and success. Hit the like button if something in this video resonated with you, even if it made you uncomfortable. Especially if it made you uncomfortable. And leave a comment telling me which of the 7 habits you recognized in yourself. Even if you disagree with me, even if you think I'm wrong, I want to know what you're thinking, what you're struggling with, what habits you see that I didn't mention. Because this conversation is bigger than just this video. It's about all of us figuring out how to build lives of freedom and meaning in a system designed to keep us consuming. Let's figure it out together. Let's wake each other up. Let's be proof that another way is possible. That's how we win. Not by judging each other, but by supporting each other in making different choices. Thanks for watching. Now go question everything.